Good morning, everybody, from the banks of the beautiful Truckee River here in Reno, Nevada. I hope that your day is off to a great start. The mighty Truckee River. When the pioneers were doing their crossings in the 1850s, 60s, 70s, that was a welcome sight when they finally cut across most of Nevada and found themselves on the banks of the beautiful Truckee River with crystal clear, drinkable water, no salt water, permeated water to drink like out in the middle of the desert if they were lucky enough to find it. But, of course, they had the arduous journey at that point of crossing the Sierra Mountains, which, of course, we also know was fraught with peril, death, in the case of the Donner Party, pure cannibalism up there in the mountains. But today we're here to talk about some different kind of history, and the history of how Reno became such a big-time divorce capital. And history that we don't remember gets faded over time. People lose memories of coming here and getting divorced and things like that. Hi. And that is the case with Reno. I think if you were asked the average person today, how did Reno get to be the divorce capital of the world at one time, especially in the 1930s, is because they designed it that way. You have to remember, until 1985 in a state like New York, it was impossible to get a divorce unless you could prove real abuse. Yes. There was no such thing in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, well, all through history, of an easy peasy divorce. No matter almost what the situation was, marriage was designed as a one and done situation. So to appear before a court of law, especially as a female, as a wife, and tried to sue for divorce was a daunting proposition. In most states, 2/3 of the states up and through the 1950s, the husband in the marriage was considered the majority property owner, and in him was vested most of the rights for divorce. But Reno had a very interesting proposition for divorcees, and they also were shrewd enough and smart enough to build an infrastructure to support a place that people would want to come to and get a divorce. For one thing, the city of Reno and in Nevada determined that if you became a resident for a 6-week period, remember 6 weeks, that's all, a month and a half, then you could be officially a resident. You come in, you drive in, you fly in, immediately establish residency. After a period of 6 weeks, you become a legal Nevada resident. You stand before a judge with a witness, somebody that says, yeah, this person was here for 6 weeks, and the judge grants you residency on the condition that you pledge to make Nevada your state of permanent residence. Well, we know what a throwaway that was, okay? But if you could get here, you could have what was called a no-fault divorce, a rubber stamp divorce. You didn't have to go into a lot of discussions. You didn't have to go and provide a lot of proof. You could stand before the judge for a couple minutes, and he would typically grant your divorce. Also, the infrastructure of the city of Reno, as I mentioned, was very shrewd. There were a lot of fancy hotels and accommodations and a lot of entertainment down here to keep people occupied for that 6-week period. In addition, there were dudette ranches where you could come and you could spend time. You could have a little taste of the cowboy life here in Nevada, and you could be entertained by everything from traveling shows to gigolos. They would all be available at your beck and call to keep you entertained during that 6-week period. And it worked very well for Reno, and by the end of the 1930s, some 30,000 people had come through Reno to get their quickie divorce. In fact, at the height of the boom in 1931, there were hundreds of prospective divorcees camped out on the banks of the Truckee River here, waiting their turn in court. Some other interesting facts about this is, of course, once you got your divorce, you were free. It made it unusual. But remember, in the early 1930s, gambling was legalized. Las Vegas, with the construction of the Hoover Dam, became a more formidable competitor for Reno, especially in the way of marriages and then later divorces, because the same laws applied. So take a famous movie star like Clark Gable being associated with legal proceedings in Las Vegas. Man, the rush was on to kind of forget Reno. Now, you've seen the modern bridge that goes across the Truckee River on South Virginia Street, but up until about maybe 5 or 10 years ago, they had the original bridge that was there, and some people called it the Bridge of Sorrows. Some people called it the Bridge of Freedom. I guess it depended on which side of the coin that you were on. But the legend held that after your divorce was decreed and you had your certificate from the clerk of the court, the best thing to do to ensure a happy second marriage was to head down to the Truckee River, go over the Bridge of Sorrows or Freedom, remove your wedding ring, and throw it into the Truckee River. Legend or fact? Well, interestingly enough, when some of the first metal detectors went down there in the late 60s, early 70s with very primitive equipment, they were only able to recover one wedding ring. But in 1976, a group with a dredge working around that bridge area recovered over 400 wedding rings. Imagine what they didn't recover down there. So as with most legends, there is always a bit of truth in it. So I hope you enjoyed this little foray into history here in Reno, Nevada. Your comments are welcome in the comments section down below. What do you think? We all know that Reno was the divorce capital of the world at one time. Simple divorce, no fault. But I'll tell you what, those days are long gone. Thumbs up are appreciated, and have yourselves a wonderful rest of the day. And thanks for being along in another foray of history.